Welcome once again. It's time for Shelf Life Book Reviews online. As always, I thank you for taking the time to watch my videos, which hopefully you do find informative. And when you go to your local bookstore, you will very seriously considering the book that I'm going to review for you now. And the book is PSYCH, The Story of the Human Mind by Paul Bloom. This is published by Echo, and it retails for $39.50. I studied psychology back in the 70s, way back. I took it for 3 years at university, and I found it to be totally fascinating. And I thought once I graduated in 76 that would be the end of my interest in psychology. Well, this book, which just came out, has just piqued my interest once again because it brings back into focus not only many of the things that I studied, but the author looks at many of the areas that were never covered during the 3 years at university. Paul Bloom teaches at the University of Toronto, and he was a former professor at Yale University. So this man comes from a great psychological background. He knows his stuff. And if you think you're getting a book that is really technical and way above your head, think again. This book is on the level of, well, anybody who, even someone who's never looked at a psychology book, will understand and find most informative and interesting. Paul Bloom looks at some of the greatest psychologists of all time, amongst them Sigmund Freud, who many said was a genius. Others had very diverse opinions of him. They thought he was not too bright on some of his topics about the id, the ego, and the superego, and a lot of the things, areas that he did cover and discuss, people today dispute. But he still had his thoughts, and some think, like I said, he was a genius. And there are other psychologists that Paul Bloom looks at too, such as B.F. Skinner. He is definitely one of the top psychologists from the past. There's Rene Descartes. Paul Bloom looks at the work of Noam Chomsky. He also studies Charles Darwin and many other psychologists who made their mark decades ago. Now, the book looks at the mind, the human brain, which, as noted in the book, it barely weighs 3 pounds, and it's a wrinkled piece of, if you saw it up close, you'd think it was a disgusting looking thing. But next to the heart, the brain is really the most important part of the body. It helps us think. It helps us make, decisions. It tells us, some of us, it tells us right from wrong. And you always hear the topic, if he used his brain, he would have been smarter. Everybody uses their brain differently. The author does look at memory, long-term memory, short-term memory, and all facets of why we remember certain things. We can remember a song that we heard 30 years ago. We can remember the lyrics perfectly, even though we haven't heard it in 30 years. And some of us can't remember what we had for breakfast yesterday. So that's the beauty of the book, that he does cover so many facets of the brain. He talks about children and how their brain develops. And he looks at their reactions to adults. A child and an adult can look at the same thing, and they get 2 different meanings. Now, the child's view of the world is often different than the adult's view, because the adults had more experience in viewing things. But the child's mind still is fascinating, and Paul Bloom looks at that as well too. He covers, beyond the mind, he covers our emotions, our reactions, pretty well how we fall in love, why we like certain things, why we dislike certain things. Technically, the book really covers all facets. And like I mentioned earlier, even if you have not read a psychology book during your lifetime, this is a fascinating book. It's almost 400 pages. It's very detailed. And the fact that the author keeps it on the level that we can relate to and understand makes it all the more engrossing. I'm sure once you do pick up the book, you will not want to put it down, because there's one fascinating chapter leads to another fascinating chapter. So, Psych, The Story of the Human Mind, is definitely a book that is highly recommended. Go to your local bookstore, have a look through it, and I'm sure you will agree with me when you see the different chapters and the diversity of the topics that Paul Bloom covers. You will want to purchase it. So let me know if you do, and if you do agree with my review. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you did find it informative. So until we meet again, stay safe, stay sane, stay in touch, and I will see you at the bookstore. Bye for now.